Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Um, a beautiful service. This feels a lot like home to me. We do our Dharma talk at our center at the same time, 10 o'clock Sunday morning, and it looks just like this with lots of folks in little boxes. And I also feel at home because I've met many of you, and we've had a little bit of time to get to know each other. And this morning, I bring you warm greetings from Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. As Todd said, we've formed some connections between our two communities, which I think is wonderful, and I've enjoyed that very much. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about those connections. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Shin practice and Zen practice are different and how they're the same. And I'm going to end with a thought for challenging times. So for those who don't know me, I'll just introduce myself a little bit more. I'm a Zen teacher in the Japanese Soto Zen tradition. And I'm with Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, which is located on the eastern shore of Bade-Makaska in Minneapolis. And that center was founded in the 70s by Donen Katagiri. He was born in Japan. He was born into a Shin family and practiced Shin Buddhism as a child. And then after World War II, he wanted to become ordained as a Shin priest. And he went to a Shin priest and it didn't work out. That priest wasn't prepared to ordain someone at that time. And he referred Katagiri to a Zen priest. So he became a Zen teacher. So I first came to that center in 1993. And over the past year and a half or so, I've made some connections with your community and with the larger Pure Land community, as Todd mentioned. And it's really been a joy. And I'm learning a little bit about Pure Land Buddhism. I have a lot to learn still. And I apologize in advance if I get anything wrong or if I have any assumptions here which are not correct. I think these connections started when I met Todd. We were introduced by Ben Connolly, and we got together to plan a visit by Duncan Williams. And as many of you know, Duncan Williams wrote a book called American Sutra about the Japanese American experience of internship during World War II, which is something I've learned more about, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, the enormity of it, the profundity of it. And Duncan also is active with a group called Tsuru for Solidarity, and he led Buddhist contingent at a protest that I went to in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That was over a year ago, I think it was in August. And it was a protest against the detention of migrant children, planned detention of migrant children at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And by the way, it seems to have been a successful protest because soon after we did it, they decided they weren't going to go through with their plan. And I think the protest may have had something to do with that. So this was organized primarily by dreamers, by young, mostly Hispanic immigrants. But there was a contingent of 25 Buddhist priests, and we marched together and brought, I think, something to the protest, some calm, some peace, and it felt wonderful. And about half of those priests were Shin priests, and about half were Zen and other denominations. And there was a tie-in to the detention during World War II here, because Fort Sill had also been used to detain Japanese American men during the war. So, and then last October, as Todd mentioned, I spoke at the Eastern Buddhist League Conference. I was part of a panel on social action. And then in March, as many of you remember, Duncan Williams came after quite a lot of planning, and our two groups co-sponsored the event, and we held it at MZMC. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Duncan's message very much. And as some of you will recall, we did a service where we used chants from both of our communities. We did the Heart Sutra, which is the chant that we do the most at MZMC. And then we also did the Jusegi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in the same service. And I thought it was beautiful. It says, you know, that we're close enough in what we do that we can come together and we can actually blend our service and express our deepest spirituality together. And that was on March 6th. And that was right about the time when the pandemic was just starting to really spread in this country. And MZMC closed a week after that event. And we went online as you did, and we've been online ever since. So I feel like the relationship between our two sanghas may have been interrupted a little bit there, but we're not going to let that stop us. I hope that these connections can continue, because we have so much in common. There are differences, of course, and one difference, maybe the most apparent, is that in Zen we emphasize meditation a great deal, and in Shin Buddhism the practice of Nembutsu is emphasized. But we chant too. We chant the Heart Sutra every morning. On Saturday we have a 20-minute chanting service with bowing and chanting, which is really beautiful. We chant the Heart Sutra, the Metta Sutra. We chant the names of the ancestors, both male and female, and it's really lovely. So chanting is an important part of what we do. There's perhaps some differences between the teacher-student relationship in Zen and Pure Land Buddhism. I was listening to a lecture by Professor Melissa Curley. Todd sent me the link to that. And she talked about how in Zen, the teacher may be a bit of a wall. It's the teacher's job to sort of bring the student to a place where they can't move, where they're kind of stuck, like a snake in a bamboo tube, as Shakyamuni Buddha said. And to help the student to discern what they can learn there. And it's this teacher's job to help the student to surpass the teacher. And she said in Shin, the teacher is maybe a little more like a window, that the teacher and student are a little more like fellow practitioners, and there's not so much of that wall element. So I don't know how consistently that plays out in the real world. I know that my own personal practice, the way I am with my students, I think I'm probably more like a window than a wall myself. And then another difference has to do maybe with the emphasis on self-power and other power. And I don't know if these are terms that you use a lot or are familiar with. Jiriki and Tariki, yes? Okay, good. Jiriki being self-power, Tariki being other power. The way I think of these within the concept of Zen is that self-power is kind of bringing the self forward to adopt a practice. I, Ted, am going to do this thing and it's going to help me to um, become spiritually more aware. And I think of other power, Tariki, more as a kind of surrender, a kind of giving up the self. The self is not trying to do anything here. The self is trying to step back and just let things in, just let them come in. And I think about maybe looking at a tree. Out here near my backyard is a gigantic cottonwood tree. And I feel a lot of affection for cottonwood trees because I grew up on a farm and we had a lot of cottonwood trees. And I can remember as a child looking at them on kind of a windy day and seeing those beautiful kind of shimmering leaves and becoming lost in that a little bit. At least that's how I remember it now. Maybe I'm not sure it was like that as a child, but I think I have this memory of kind of losing myself as a child. And I think of self-power would be me sort of adopting a practice, as in, I am going to sit and I'm going to watch this tree and I'm going to focus on it. And if my attention wanders, I will bring my focus back to this tree. I will do this practice. Whereas other power, I think it's more like just letting it be. I can look at this tree, I can see the beautiful leaves, I can see the shimmering, and I can just watch and I can become very receptive and kind of lose myself in it. And my own desires are not so strong. And I'm just being, no different from the tree, just allowing it to be. And some people say that Zen is more self-power and Shin is more other power. But there is a lot of other power in Zen. And I talk to my students a lot about it's important to do the focused practice. We focus on our breath in meditation, that's important, but that's not all you do forever. Ultimately, you kind of reach that point of a kind of surrender, a kind of just stepping aside, a kind of letting this other power happen, because it's not about us, it's about just letting it not be about us and kind of the relief of allowing that to happen. So this ease and repose is an important thing. And we have things in Zen we do. We have ritual, we have oryoki meals, and we have chanting. And those things help us with that, help us with the practice, help us with that other power aspect. So there's quite a lot of overlap there, I think. And whether you talk about self-power practices in Shin Buddhism, I don't know. I would like to know more about that. But what I do know is that we both do a practice that is grounded in compassion, following the examples of Shakyamuni Buddha and Amida Buddha, following that bodhisattva spirit and trying to carry it forward in the world. And so ultimately, I think we're the same. And the world certainly needs that right now. The world is, as we all know, and compassion and quiet is something that we can bring to it. So I would like to finish with a thought. It doesn't come from Buddhist literature. It comes from a book. I read a book by Atul Gawande called Being Mortal. Maybe some of you have seen it. I don't know. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, it says. And I thought it was a beautiful book. And what it really focuses on is end of life things, the process of final illness and dying. Beautifully written, very compassionate. And he says this thing at the end, and he's really talking about this dying process, but it applies in other ways too. And I'd just like to read a few sentences. He says, "I am leery of suggesting the idea that endings are controllable. No one ever really has control. Physics and biology and accident ultimately have their way in our lives. But the point is that we are not helpless either. Courage is the strength to recognize both realities. We have room to act, to shape our stories, though as time goes on, it is within narrower and narrower confines. And when I read this, and it was kind of the culmination of the book, I thought this kind of helps me to pull together some thoughts I've been having. No one ever really has control, but the point is that we are not helpless either. Courage is the strength to recognize both realities. And I think during difficult times like this, it's important to remember, yes, many things are beyond our control, and we need to truthfully acknowledge that. But we should never dwell on that too long without also bringing in the reality that we can make a difference, that there are many things that we can change. And this combination of an honest understanding of what we can't change and an honest understanding of what we can change, it's essential that those things go together. And I think that's consistent with Shakyamuni Buddha's message in the Four Noble Truths. We take a realistic view of suffering and impermanence. We know that we can't change impermanence. And yet we know there's a path. There is the Eightfold Path toward ending suffering, because we can control our response to the understanding that things are impermanent. And so another way to say this is, the outcome I leave to the universe, but the effort I can control. I can control my own effort. And it seems to fit a little bit the opening meditation about tenderness and power. Right, Connie's agreeing. Because tenderness, when we think of what we can't change, you know, and the pain of that, we need to be so tender when we think about that. We need to be so tender with ourselves when we think about these difficult truths about reality. But we also have the power, you know, we have the power to mitigate human suffering or to end human suffering and to change things for the better. So there is much we can do, and we can do it together. And I'm just wishing all of you the strength and the peace of mind that this beautiful practice can provide in the coming weeks and months and years. And thanks again so much for having me to speak today. And I'll end with a bow.